I love this like double wool like teacup. Like doesn't hurt my hands because it's got like a gap.
You've air gapped your tea.
Yeah.
All right. So this is our episode before the election. I'm feeling pretty good. I think
We're gonna be
polling
huge libs and be like, oh no, he won. What are we gonna do?
No. The election hasn't happened yet. So I'm looking at the polling out of Idaho or Ohio, and it looks like it's going to go blue.
Sorry, we don't mean to make fun of people. Only a little bit.
I think that's kind of been the consensus of like the most of the podcasts I listen to is they're like, I gaslit myself into thinking she could win in like the week before. And before that, I thought, no way she'll win. Then the last week thought she'll win. And then they're like, why did I do that to myself?
Yeah, I like went to bed after they called North Carolina and like I was like, all right, I think I know where this is going. And I woke up unsurprised.
Yeah, wife woke me up at like 3 a.m. freaking the fuck out. And I was like, did they call it? And they were like, not yet. And then I rolled over and was on my phone for the next 2 hours being like, yeah, not surprised with what it was like when I went to sleep. But being on the West Coast is like that.
Yeah, you're up later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like the county by county data. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of news, I feel like, Emily Drabinski wrote a piece that I think was not helpful in any way. Like she's beating the drum. She's like, academic libraries are going to be targeted. Librarians are going to be targeted. It's like, yeah, I know. But I think it was in like a non-library publication. So it was like trying to get, I think it was in Inside Higher Ed. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it was in Inside Higher Ed or something. I don't think it was just like the ALA's blog.
Yeah, and you have to remind faculty to care about us because half the time they're like, oh, you mean we can either give you a salary or keep the journal that only I care about? Well, I know what decision I'm going to make. I'm so glad I'm not in higher ed anymore.
It's not
just
great.
Wait until the bullshit hits the fan in public libraries, Jay. Just wait.
But it already has.
It's been hitting the fan for a while, actually.
Yeah, I'm just going to be a little latte sipping liberal here in Massachusetts, I guess.
Are you going to be every person who I meet in Boston who I tell them I'm from Texas and they're like, oh, Texas.
God, every time I'm like, my boyfriend lives in Texas, they're like, ugh. I'm like, y'all, I know. I've been there.
I am aware.
I love to say that the very first time I visited you in Texas, I got off the plane in Dallas, right? Because that's where my layover was. And like literally I step off of the plane and I get into the airport and immediately a dude walks out of the men's restroom wearing like a transphobic t-shirt. And I was like, cool. But I literally had no other issues.
Yeah.
I just can't go to Odessa. That's the thing. I just can't go there.
Yeah. Whereas, you can hang out with me in the valley and you go see the guys wearing the pink pumps dancing.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting a little fruity with it.
Yeah, they get a little fruity with it down there. It's fun. Shit's been bad, people. Like, this doesn't change much. It's like, I don't want to be like, oh, everything's fine. It's not fine. But it's been bad. So, we have to not get
planning.
We have to, like, seriously, we've been on this very program. We've been saying the exact shit that we are going to tell you tonight for like 3 years now.
I feel like every time there's like a Democratic president, all of the liberals like gaslight themselves into believing that like no more work needs to be done now.
They went to brunch. They said they were going to go to brunch and they went to brunch.
But then like the worst leftists, are like, oh, well, then I hope Trump wins so that people start organizing again. I'm like, that's not what I wanted either.
Yeah. Fuck.
But it has been interesting, the sort of lack of resistance among liberals, at least online. I think during the inauguration, there's probably going to be protests and stuff. People are going to like...
God, a liberal J6 is going to be so fucking funny.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I think...
Oh, obviously not, but I've already seen people be like, oh, he faked the election. I'm like, y'all.
I did like what Devin was saying, which is like, if you have liberals in your life, it is your duty to say, hey, doesn't something seem strange about the results?
It is quite funny. When I saw people immediately being like, oh, it was Russiagate all over again. It was like, oh, PG.
Not even. It was like 2005 all over again. It was like, we have to get more racist.
that, but also people being like, "Oh, he cheated. We have to do recounts. So we need to wait longer before we call." Yada yada. I'm like, y'all, you can't make fun of Republicans for doing this and then do it.
Well, and the thing that gets me about that is it's so like myopic because like they've been spending the past 4 years making sure we don't have another 2020 election result, right? Like gerrymandering, making sure nobody does a vote by mail. Like they've been spending the past 4 years doing that shit to get this result in otherwise completely legitimate ways. So just jumping straight into the conspiracy thinking is just, when I first saw people, I was like, oh, for the love of God, we're not doing this, are we? Okay, we are. Oh boy. Actually,
right-wing crazies are way better organizers and better at solidarity than we are a lot of the time.
They're also just as infighty, and it's just that they don't they don't infight. They don't infight over the same types of things, so it allows them to still cohere politically.
Yeah,
but they will rat fuck individuals.
Yeah,
but the program kind of keeps going on in this populist way. I've seen some really good stuff. Seen some really bad takes. The one thing I'm surprised I haven't seen anybody mention. I mean, literally, I haven't read this anywhere, and it took like weeks to occur to me. Vote turnout was so much higher in 2020 because everyone was allowed to vote by mail, because a ton of states said you could vote by mail, and voting was easier the last election. And like, that's a good reason why turnout's probably down.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot more people are disabled and dead.
We should have been spending the last 4 years trying to get vote by mail in so many more states, particularly, the ones that flipped blue last time, like Georgia and Arizona. Maybe if that had happened, we would have had,
It was just so strange, though, that it took so long. Yeah, it's just strange that it took so long for me to realize, like, no one has written anything about how much vote by mail was expanded in 2020. And, like, it hasn't come up at all.
Well, because they had to, like, totally get rid of all of the, like, they had to, like, completely abandon COVID stuff as part of the platform because Biden whiffed it so bad. Because if they focus on the fact that, like, it was under Trump that the COVID stuff was initially put under, like, they can't take any credit for that initial bit. And then they got rid of everything, like, almost immediately. Like, the vote by mail thing was a COVID thing,
Yeah, it's just strange to me that, like, even the leftists I follow, because I'm not reading, like, liberal rags. I'm still hoping someone on Blue Sky figures out a way to block links from, like, the New York Times. Just, like, so I don't have to see people reposting. It's like, stop posting your garbage here just because you have a weird fetish for being humiliated.
That's one way to go about it, I guess.
Yeah, speaking of Blue Sky, actually, I just kind of found out this thing where there are other people doing moderation lists. So when you report, so people label accounts, they can't ban them themselves because they're not like part of the Blue Sky team, but you can get on a labeling list. And then when you report a post or an account, you can report it to the person who maintains that list. So there's like a transphobia list. So block the person, but it will label them transphobic. So then you'll see that they've like, what kind of transphobia they're peddling and stuff like that. And so even if the Blue Sky moderators will be like, well, we can't kick them for saying something like that because it's like an edge case, this moderator will still at least label them. So it's kind of like Shinigami eyes.
I still like to caution people to be careful with that kind of stuff because like people do weaponize that shit against people. Yeah. So, take it with a grain of salt, but
yeah, but I mean, given the current influx of chuds, it's kind of like it's helpful.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many of them trying to get established. There's a bunch of people who follow me who I think are just liberals. But because they're liberals, it just sounds like stuff that a right-winger pretending to be a liberal would say to me. Because like they're like, dog mom, resistor. And I'm like, I don't know. Is this like a right-wing person pretending to be a liberal? Or is this just how liberals it is?
No, it's just like a 41-year-old white lady librarian. That's who it is.
It is. And you know what? If you're listening, thank you for coming.
Stop reading Harry Potter. There are other books for adults.
Read another book. But I'm hoping I'm radicalizing some of the grandmas who are following me for some reason.
It's the best. That's the best you can hope for.
Yeah, I just want that photo of the Hamas guy and then the old lady in the recliner with an AK-47 in her lap. And it's like library punk, the people following library punk.
It's not wrong. Although most of our followers are like library school students. I think, right? That's who are like our audiences.
On Blue Sky right now, yeah, but it's a lot more like younger librarians. Yeah, in general, people who listen to the podcast, but like on Blue Sky, because we're on the starter pack that's really popular. Yeah, we're getting a lot of like retired librarians, older people. So welcome. But you got to post a little bit so I can get a feel for you before I'm going to follow you back, making sure you're not, not being weird.
Free Palestine, the IRA did nothing wrong, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to my friends in Hezbollah, Hamas, and the IRA.
Yeah, exactly. That's our politics.
Okay. Well, I guess we can officially get started. I'm Justin. I'm Skullcom Librarian. My pronouns are he and they.
Sadie, I work IT at a public library, and my pronouns are they, them.
I'm Jay. I'm a cataloging librarian, and my pronouns are he, him.
Behold, the atheist's nightmare.
What's that from?
I think Kent Hovind. Is that his name, or is that the other guy? He's just some old creationist grifter. He's still around. Is it Kent Hovind, or is that the Australian guy? Well, they're both Australian. There's a lot of Australian creationists who come to America to do their grifts. But yeah, he's holding up a banana. No, Ray Comfort. That's who it is. Kent Hovind's the other guy.
Ray Comfort sounds like a porn name.
It does. Should remake Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights is so good. If there's a way I could tie that into this fucking podcast, I would make watch it.
I've seen it.
I know you have. Sadie, have you seen Boogie Nights?
I don't think I have, actually.
It's real good.
That's good.
I should find a way to work it in.
Discord movie night?
Yeah, it's about the 70s porn industry in the 70s turning into the 80s. But it's about utopia and disillusionment. And it's also the only good thing Marky Mark's ever done.
Okay, that's why I've heard of it. Marky Mark.
Yeah, Phil Sy Hoffman's in it. Yeah, it's real good.
Okay, so I'm trying to do like more segments and stuff like that. So I'm going to try some, I guess this is news. Leaked documents show what phone's secretive tech gray key can unlock. So this is from 404 Media. I have a subscription if you ever need to get access to it, but I highly recommend you support them because they do extremely good research and I want this publication to stick around. So they have like a podcast, they have stuff. This is not a brand deal. I just like the product. And they also write really interesting stuff about like how many paywalls do you put up? How many barriers do you put up in order to like keep your organization running? So like, when do we decide to put something behind a paywall? Like,
a pain wall.
But when they're talking like pain points or like frustration points, they're like some you just need to create an account to read, and then some you have to pay. And they're like these different layers of things like create the incentive to people to value what you put out. Interesting stuff. Probably relates to podcast, but we don't have a paywall here. So the Gray Key is a phone unlocking and forensics tool used by law enforcement. I believe it first became known in like 2018, and it was kind of a big deal where people found out. I think this was after the San Bernardino shooting was when it was first reported, or maybe it was a similar de-encryption thing. But this is the stuff that can just straight up crack iPhones and Androids. And so there was a leak to show what phones Gray Key can unlock and what operating systems it can unlock. So it's only able to retrieve partial data from all modern iPhones. So again, it has to be like a newer phone as well that run iOS 18 or 18.0.1. This is the first time that there's been a leak of which phones Gray Key is able to or unable to access. It's also a breakdown of Gray Key's capabilities against Android devices, which varies widely because Android is obviously like not just one thing. There's lots of different Android operating systems.
Still mostly Google though.
Yeah. But the thing is, I think the main takeaway here is like the more new and the more different it is, the longer it takes Gray Key to catch up. But there was a quote from a guy who worked at Apple to create the thing where if you haven't unlocked your phone, basically the USB port will only charge. It will not give data. That guy works for Gray Key now. So they're going to hire the people who build the security stuff from Apple to then break the stuff they build. So they will catch up.
I mean, I think it was CrimeThink who put this out. I need to look it up, but there's like this great little OPSEC blog post that used the film Mad Max Fury Road to talk about concepts in OPSEC. And one of the most important things about it was like, it is never about fully getting away from adversaries. You will never beat them forever. It's always just about being one step ahead of them and then moving on, because they will figure it out. You just have to slow them down, like in Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah, a movie I never remember how it ends. I remember like the first half of that movie, and then the rest, nothing. Cannot remember how it ends ever. I've seen it 3 times.
Oh, I've seen it so many times.
It's a good movie. I don't know why I can't remember the end. Anyway, so GrayKey has much less capability with iPhones running beta builds. So go enable your beta builds right now, I guess. Saying none for the various betas of 18.1 across all modern iPhone iterations. For Google's Pixel range, GrayKey is able only to extract partial data on the most recent Pixel devices, including Pixel 9 released in August. According to the document, this is specifically when the phone is in after first unlock state, which is when somebody has unlocked the device at least once since it was powered on. So probably if your phone is seized, then it's already in that state. So I think before first unlocked, it can't get any data.
So have your phone off, and even if they turn it on, don't unlock it.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And use a passcode or a pattern or literally anything other than biometrics to unlock your phone.
At least while you're at protests and stuff.
At
Or
least
if you
while you're at
suspect you're gonna
protests,
get
yeah.
arrested.
And make sure you, like, I know a lot of phones have that. If a certain other device is near, you won't need to unlock it. Like I had that with
Like
an Apple Watch or something.
Watch, yeah.
So take
Turn
that shit off. Take that shit off or turn that shit off. Yeah.
Probably take it off. I bet Apple Watches are easy to crack.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not one of these people that's like, get a burner phone, because as Alice Macrina told, at least me, I don't know if she told us on this podcast before, but like I've seen her do this spiel before, like getting a burner phone, just like, oh, I'm going to go to a protest, I'm going to have a burner phone. Like there's, oh, you suddenly turned your phone off at the same exact time as this protest, and then you turned it back on once you got home. They're still going to know where you were. It's about changing a pattern of behavior like consistently. That is what is most important.
Turn your phone off all the time, and just at random times. Just turn it on and off all day.
Use
Probably
Tor
good for your mental
browser
health, too.
randomly. Yeah. It's like, don't use Tor just to do illegal shit kind of thing. Like use Tor all the time if you can.
You can, and there's certain browsers you can turn it on to. If there is an Onion version of a site, it will always open the Onion version. So I think Brave does that. So you can have it.
Don't use Tor through anything but the Tor browser.
Okay. Well, it'll open the Tor browser.
But like the point of like, okay, yeah, because like the point of the Tor browser is that it's also like the same exact size, the same exact spot on your desktop, like the same exact settings and everything. So it helps reduce browser fingerprinting as well.
Yeah, I think when you, because I turned this off because it was like annoying, because it'll do it for like all the news websites. Like New York Times will bring up its Onion site, and it's like, I don't really need that. But you could turn that on if you are, maybe doing some of the stuff we'll talk about, like ordering controlled substances on the internet that you might need. So
how do you do, fellow trans masks?
Yeah. So historically, they have eventually caught up and managed to get partial information from the phones. And it was also iOS 18 that caused all those phones to reset, which pissed off a lot of cops. And they started having conspiracy brain about it, where they thought the phones were sending signals in between each other to reboot each other. And it was like shit that the iPhone can't do. It was literally just like, because the code was in there, it was going to always reboot at some point when they turned it back on. Even if it was in like the moment they turn it on, it'll be, oh, I need to activate this code. And then it reboots the phone. So anyway, keep your iOS up to date. I know my phone is constantly not updating properly, so go in there manually once in a while. Even if you have auto updates on, just make sure it's finishing the updates.
Yeah, because sometimes it'll like download it, but it won't install it because you haven't been like plugged into power or something. Sometimes it's just fussy. So
yeah, sometimes it's like, well, is it okay if I update? And I'm like, auto update is on. It's like, but is it okay? I'm like, it's on for a reason.
We have 23 apps waiting to update. And I'm like, what the fuck does auto update do then?
Anyway, this is also a chance for me to be high and mighty about everyone who's like, Android is so much better. I'm like, don't have brand loyalty. Two, Android is Google most of the time. It's not like the thing it once was.
Yeah.
People think that they know all the shit because they read a tech blog in like 2012.
Yeah, not the same.
Yeah, no, shit's different. It's like people who like go like ride or die for like Mozilla Firefox. I'm like, no, they're like all the same now.
Yeah.
Some are more secure, some are more private. Just, it's about patterns of behavior. That's what's most important.
So I think that was all the news. Jay, you have a thing. Well,
Yeah.
Should I explain the topic of the episode first before you go
Yes.
into that?
Why I was gonna my thing was part of the episode.
Right. But we haven't said what we're doing.
Right. You're the one who launched into this, not me.
Well, okay. So the what we're doing is we got a question from someone who works in a public library asking, what is it I can do to support people after this election during a Trump presidency? And so we gave them a bunch of answers. This is in the Horror Vanguard Discord. And then we thought, okay, well, let's just compile those answers here and add some stuff. And that's what we're going to talk about for the main segment of the show. And then Jay has something from Black Rose.
Yeah, so I saw this come up because, like, I know that leave me alone text scammy people. They've been getting bold lately. Has anyone else been getting the, like, group FaceTime calls that are from scammers? Those shit.
No, only you.
Nope.
Yeah, I guess it's only me.
You're special, Jay.
You get a shit ton of them.
I do. It's really annoying. Anyway, so Black Rose has been putting out these like blog posts about like anarchists in the labor sector, and they've been interviewing various like people doing labor organizing in various fields. And one of the most recent one was from a public library worker in North Carolina, where like I don't know if folks know this or not, but like you cannot collectively bargain in North Carolina, at least not if you're a public sector employee. And so like a lot of the stuff that people are afraid about, like unions and stuff under a Trump presidency going forward, it's like our comrades in the South and in a lot of this country actually like have already been dealing with this since the beginning, right? And so I thought it might like help people just to read like what like even if you're not an anarchist, just like what as like librarians who are leftists, whatever flavor of leftist you are, like going like what does it look like to do labor organizing in a library when draconian labor laws exist? Especially like I'm in Massachusetts, I technically legally can't strike because I'm a public servant. Right. The only illegal strike is a failed strike, but still, like that's in my collective bargaining agreement, right? Whatever. Don't listen to that shit. But I mean, listen to that shit, but don't listen to that shit. So, like, I don't know. The link will be in the notes, but I think an important thing to take from it is that, like, even if you can't quote unquote collectively bargain, you can still unionize, and there are other ways that you can put pressure on administration, especially like as public librarians. Like learning like who has what power over your job, like in a city or state government, and knowing how to actually put pressure on those people, whether your union is independent or part of a larger union, like if you're organizing with like other public sector employees, for example. Like what does it actually look like to do labor organizing when it is way more hostile than it is here in like Massachusetts, for example, where I'm very cushy and have a great little union job now, right? So I just thought it might be nice. It also like is a great example of like coalition building. Like I feel like this is like as librarians and like Emily Drabinski, this was like one of her whole things as being ALA president was about librarians doing labor organizing, because like labor organizing truly is one of those areas that is like coalition building. Like it is kind of like a big tent kind of thing. Like you might have different ideologies and different politics, but you are building solidarity like with your coworkers and with your community around specific issues. And through that organizing, you can also model different methods than like electoral politics. We'll put it that way. But yeah, I just thought it might be nice for people to read that interview if people are freaking out a bit, because like the stuff that we're kind of afraid of, like our comrades in the South have been dealing with this shit like forever. Like this ain't new. People already can't like do the kind of labor organizing they can do in other country. And they're still successful. Like there's some really successful like labor organizing happening in North Carolina, for example, but in everywhere. Yeah, that's all I really had to say about that.
This is why I know there's a lot of critiques of the IWW, and me and Jay have talked about this. But the reason I still believe in the IWW as a concept is one thing they've been very good at in the past couple decades is unionizing in places where other unions won't bother to go because they've given up on trying to, like Starbucks. A lot of those early Starbucks unions were some wobbly, just got like a fucking bug up their ass and was like, let's just salt this place. Why the fuck not? So it's a great organization that creates radical unionists. So there are a lot of like people in unions like Jay's who I'm sure don't understand the power and political importance of their union. But everyone who joins the IWW does. And they love to go around. There was a story.
They offer great labor training, like organizing training. IWW
and they also give people information and to understand like the IWW started when labor unions were illegal. They've never given up that outlook of the wildcat strike. Like if your union is not going to be on your terms, dual card in the IWW, organize with us, we'll do a wildcat strike. That happened in West Virginia with teachers who were, again, legally not allowed to strike. They went on a wildcat strike. Their union couldn't authorize it, but they organized themselves and did it. I'm sure there were some wobblies in there going, yeah, let's do this. Right.
This is why rank and file shit is so important.
And the other thing, the reason I was thinking about it, because Jay mentioned, you can't strike, is the IWW's conceptualization of sabotage, which is not just like destruction of things, but like work to rule.
Sick outs, strategic sick outs. Yeah.
Waste the employer's money. If you work in, say, a restaurant, pile everyone's plates high. You're doing your job. You're doing great. The people you're serving love you, and you are costing a shit ton of money. If you work in public transit, a fare strike, no longer collecting fares from people. People who've done fare strikes win everything they ask for. They didn't take a day off work. They didn't go on strike. They just said, hey, the fare system's not working today. We've turned it off. 3 days of free rides around the whole city. They got everything they wanted, right? So sabotage has, and this is like sort of the same thing where I can't remember what her name was, but there was a wobbly who got involved with environmental stuff. It was part of getting people away from spiking trees because those hurt the workers, because it would injure the workers who were sawing into a tree that was spiked, and instead getting them on your side. Because if you do something that you need to get them to actually realize like they need to do something. So sabotage through that conceptualization is very, very powerful. And it can be stuff like work to rule, waste money, waste time. So, yeah.
And I just want to say, don't assume that because you're part of a union, that your fellow union members know what any of that means. I brought up work to rule in a union meeting once and had 3 or 4 people, including those who were on the executive board, go, what? What do you mean by that? So, like, there's still a level of education that needs to happen, even if you are unionized, for your fellow union members. So don't forget about that either.
Labor Notes has some, like IWW has resources, but Labor Notes also has ebooks as well as like workshops that do like the secrets of a successful union organizer and like what to do when your union breaks your heart, like that kind of stuff. Like genuinely very helpful information for like organizing your workplace and stuff.
Yeah. But I was also saying that's why the IWW is good, because you know that there's someone reliably radical and educated, because a lot of the stuff the IWW does is they advise other unions. And so they don't get a lot of the credit. And people are like, well, the IWW only has like 3,000 members or whatever. Yeah, because they have just one guy who lives in like bumfuck nowhere who goes and says, hey, you guys should do a wildcat strike. Hey, you guys need to start building up a strike fund. Hey, you should just pass around an Excel spreadsheet. And like, and then they organize under, the Starbucks union, right? It's not the IWW Starbucks union. It's just, so they seed unions all over the place. And I think that's why people don't take it seriously, but for me, it's why I still believe in it. But again, I don't evangelize it in any way. I don't feel like you have to join, but I feel like if you want a radical education, you should definitely learn about what the IWW is and what it stands for, because they're playing by a different rule book. And it's the rule book that I think we're going to suggest today, which is building structures outside of what you already have. Didn't mean to go on a rant, but So, what can libraries actually do within their limitations? So, that was the question that we got. And I think some of the responses we gave was, well, I think the takeaway was you're going to be limited in what the library can directly provide because the library in itself is not a radical organization. It's no matter, even if you were the director of the library and had free reign to run any programs you wanted, you could do more, definitely, but you're still going to ultimately be limited by the structure of you're a city employee or a county employee, and you've got certain limitations. So there's certain things you can do to encourage people to take advantage of the library, but ultimately you need to be looking outside of the library into your community where you're going to have more freedom to organize and help more directly.
Like, use your skills as a librarian elsewhere.
Yeah. Like volunteering at an info shop, like a radical info shop. So one of the first things I recommended was providing information because that's what a library is good at. No one's really going to give you trouble about it. You can do this kind of quietly if you're not at the top of the ranks. But, there are a bunch of zines out there. You can definitely create and print out a bunch of them because, you work there. You have unlimited printer privileges usually. Print out a bunch of zines and stuff and put them there and say like, hey, this is, our community members made some of these. What do I do with this? What do I do with that? Get a little display stand, put it somewhere and say like community information.
I think it's zinelibraries.info or something, like has good resources for zine libraries and like supplies and everything.
Yeah, I also have a link to a radical zine library that's hosted on GitHub. But also, like the Boston Public Library has this little corner next to the cafe that's like a big bulletin board, and people can just put whatever there, I think. I don't know what the rules are for it, but creating basically like a little table and a bulletin board and just calling it like community center, that will allow people from the community to put stuff there. And then you, as a member of your community, can also print out local zines and stuff that might have information that's relevant about immigration services and like groups, people who are doing mutual aid around immigration services or food or trans healthcare. And, you can put them out there and say, oh, I guess someone dropped off a bunch of those. So it depends on how sneaky you have to be about it. But
you are also a patron at your library, like outside of you being an employee, you are also a patron.
Yeah, it depends on the environment you're in, right? I'm just saying, like, if you have a hostile supervisor, then maybe you drop it off after work hours and say, oh, someone wants to come in. Whatever you got to do. Make your own risk assessment. I also think it would be good to have like zine making classes and programming so that you can invite groups in, like groups that might be able to share information or who are currently, like abortion funds. I know like there are a lot of abortion funds in Texas who some of them operate outside of Texas because they can't really operate in Texas as much anymore. But if most of their stuff is online, maybe saying, hey, you should make some physical stuff to circulate in the community. And bringing them in to, inviting them to come to this zine workshop you're going to do and teach them and let them print out zines and then leave some at the library. And then they can go out and put those in the community and you've got some there. So just encouraging people to come into programming is also going to look good because it creates this sort of feedback loop of we had this great programming. We had a bunch of people show up. Let's make more time, more space for programming. What the person in the Horror Vanguard Discord said was, our budget's limited. And what I was saying is if you create a feedback loop like this, you make an argument for more budget or a reallocation of the budget to say, look, this is popular. People like this. And then you'll be able to do more in the future. So it's a long game and it can take months and years. But if you get the metrics and show it off, then bringing in people from the community, just send an email. Just say, hey, I want to help you make zines. I want to help your organization. I want to help something. Why don't you come to this program or tell us a time that would work for you? And then you can set the program to that time and do something like that. It creates a cycle. That also goes for like providing space, like say, reaching out to a group and saying, hey, did you know the library has like meeting rooms you can use? Like if you want to meet here, and that way that you can also show like, oh, there's community engagement, there's community groups coming in. They're using, there's more booking for the meeting rooms, the study rooms, stuff like that. So that's also useful. And a lot of people don't think about it. Like I've definitely been at like DSA meetings where they're like, where can we meet? And I'm like, have we thought about the library? And they're like, oh yeah. So, just making it obvious that there is space and resources to use to your community because, people want to get involved. So we're just trying to give some ideas of like how to do that.
if your library is jonesing to be like, oh, hey, well, we have to let Nazis use the meeting rooms, then there's nothing to say that you can't use the meeting rooms. That's what they're there for.
And a lot of libraries have the ability to offer spaces after library hours too. So don't look at a library's hours and go, oh, well, we can't meet before 6. We might not even try. Like, really look at the community room, like policies or whatever, because a lot of them, you can rent it out up until like 8 or 9 p.m. or whatever. So like there's normally some wiggle room there.
Yeah. And as an employee, you can help people navigate that bureaucracy. Like they might go, oh, well, your hours don't work for us. Let them know. Well, let me talk to the director to see if we can change that policy. Because if you tell us a time, then I can go to them and say, hey, we've got this community group that wants to use it. Can we have after hours meetings? So you might even be able to get the policy changed just by demonstrating interest. And you can do all of this in sort of like a non-partisan way. Again, because that's the limits of the radicalism of the institution, sometimes you might have to be careful about how you frame these things. I have to do that all the time. I have to frame a lot of stuff where I'm like, well, we should be doing this because we should be doing this. But then I have to say, well, it's in the benefit of the institution for us to do this. So learn how to pitch things, I guess, is part of it. Learn how to make it sound the way, because sometimes the people who are agreeing with you also agree with you, but they don't have the way of framing it in such a way where they're like, oh, this will fit in the mission, whereas the mission is milquetoast and should be better. But
yeah, like I am a zine selector at my library now, and like that means that it is totally within my ability to be like, we're going to buy these zines that are about like Palestine. And the other people who are zine selectors are also little radical weirdos that are like, oh, we should absolutely buy the zines about Palestine. And so then we have zines about Palestine that like support that, where the money goes directly to like help funds for like getting people out of Gaza and stuff. So like, you gotta do that shit, because it's like, oh yeah, they can't censor our collection development, and it's a zine. The kind of people who read zines like care about Palestine and shit. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. You can also be like, especially if something's local, be like, look, this is local stuff. This is local community. So that has always been, particularly that's the way that queer collections have been built, is like people going downtown and grabbing like all the gay magazines and stuff and being like, we're building a special collection. They do that every day for, 10, 20 years. And then turns out they end up with like one of the best special collections of queer life in their city. So like, even when homophobia was like a lot higher, relative, it's all relative. Like, who fucking knows what's higher or lower? But they could spend public money on this stuff because they made a justification. And the justification was, this is our community. So knowing how to frame things and knowing how to pitch things, I think, is like invaluable if you're working in a library and you want to support your community. I mentioned immigration lawyers and law groups, but like government services support, I feel is going to be a big thing. So immigration. So if you have groups that are doing like mutual aid for immigration, or you have law firms who you still have to pay whatever, but they are doing this kind of stuff, invite them to come do programming. I mean, again, weigh the risk, because if you have cops at your library, or your cops going to do any immigration enforcement for people who show up, like weigh all those risks.
Step 1, get the cops out of your library. Step 2.
Yeah.
You will have lawyers in the room. So it's like, I don't know if the cops are going to try anything crazy. Definitely bring in lawyers, not just advocates. If you're going to do something that's going to bring undocumented people into your building, make sure lawyers are there. But also maybe, again, with that community notice board, putting information to those groups out there in multiple languages. Look up your city government's who has low proficiency English and what languages do they speak. So the people who can't read English, what are they speaking? Because it might be different from the most common second languages. So I was looking this up for Boston the other day. Depending where you are in Boston, you have they only measure people who have low English proficiency. So that's like 70%. I think in some places it's as high as 20% people who cannot read or write in English. And then depending on the area, the most spoken language is going to be different. So some places it's going to be Spanish. Most places it's going to be Spanish. But other places it ended up being like Chinese or Korean.
Or like Haitian Creole. Yeah.
Haitian Creole's almost always like 3 or 4. So, look, if your city has demographic data on low English speakers, which if you live in a big city, it probably will. If you're in a small city, you're just going to have to guess probably. but odds are it's going to be Spanish. So, make sure that that's available. I would say Spanish and French are the most useful because a lot of Creoles are based on Spanish and French. If you go to school in Haiti, you will learn French in school. So even if you can't get it translated into Haitian Creole, a lot of Haitians can speak French. Not always very good, depends on how long they lived in Haiti. So it depends, but just keep it in mind. And then, of course, like Korean, Chinese, different types of Chinese. I think a lot of people write traditional
Mandarin
Chinese
versus Cantonese. Yeah.
Yeah. And in
Vietnamese.
Boston, they usually do distinguish them, but in some cases, the data they have isn't good enough. So they just have to say Chinese because they don't know, like, the breakdown.
Well, and also, isn't it like if you are from Hong Kong and know Cantonese, don't you, then you probably also know Mandarin, right?
No.
Mandarin's
only been recent in Hong Kong from Chinese immigrants.
Oh.
And Hong Kong Cantonese is different from other Cantonese.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, learn something new every day. I used to have a student worker who was from Hong Kong, and like her English was better than some of like my other student workers where English was an acquired language because she had already learned like Mandarin and Cantonese. So learning English was easier for her than if she had only just learned English.
Yeah. Hong Kong also uses a lot more English because it was an English colony.
Oh,
and there are a lot of English words in Hong Kong Cantonese because it got Creolized a little bit.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That's why it's different, is because of all the English influence. And then guides on benefits. So one thing I've been talking about on Blue Sky is during the 2016 presidency, like 2017, a lot of stuff that was government information disappeared, particularly around the Affordable Care Act. So it became a lot harder to learn about getting an Affordable Care Act plan. The websites broke. The websites took down helpful information. Like, I was watching it happen in real time. It was very, very bad. So if those sites break down again, you might have to make external guides to show people, okay, I know the site's intentionally confusing now, so here's how you get through it. So you might have to start creating guides to get through government services like immigration, passport, and hopefully people will like collectivize these guides and share them among each other, because that kind of stuff
do that
exists.
instead of those like cringy lib guides that went around in 2020. Like do this instead than those.
Yeah. When the sites start changing over, I think we should look at making like a GitHub project to share just guides for navigating these websites so that we can update them as those sites change. Maybe we'll find some comrades. What I'm thinking of as a model for that, there used to be these really cheap open source classes for older people to learn computers. And they were very, very, very basic. And they were kind of like slideshows, basically, but they were open source and they were very good. So making something like that is just like clear, step by step, posted on Git so we can change it, I think would be a really good project. And so hopefully maybe we can get some people together to work on that, or at least get a group of people who steal this idea. There's no copyright. Copyright is dead, and we have killed it.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me.
So yeah, go do that, or reach out. I mean, I would be happy to help if I have time. I think especially if you have people coming to you multiple times a day asking how to use these websites, it's in your best interest to just put the work in to make a better guide, and then share it. That's like the open education thing, is don't make everyone reinvent the wheel. So let's get these guides out there. That's also the good thing about
LibGuides is that like you can like people can use your guide as a template if it's like in the community, whatever. Like that's the good thing about LibGuides, is that there's that model. So like make sure if you make a LibGuide like this that it's searchable and findable in that, so that people can just copy that data over.
Yeah, but that functionality is a little wonky, so we need to also like push them up through social media so people find them too.
Yeah.
But just steal this book. Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah.
But we need like a visibility in a different way. Harden your policies. I don't remember exactly what I meant when I wrote this.
You didn't. I did. I threw those in there right before we started recording. I mean, like if you have a community room policy, if you have a collection management policy, if you have a favorable board now, don't rely on it being favorable in a year or two's time. And it's a lot harder to change policies once they're in place than it is when they need to be made up whole cloth or whatever. Like boards should be updating policies as they go. But if it has been updated very recently, there's less of a reason to go back and revisit it and waste the board's time. So figure out what policies need to be hardened now and see what you can do to get those in front of a favorable board. If you need to make any necessary changes to put in words that you're not going to get rid of shit just for being queer, that kind of thing. Start trying to be proactive about that within the bounds of your own professional duty. So like Justin's saying, figure out how to phrase things instead of going, well, I don't want I don't want this bullshit to happen on my time. You can phrase it in a way that aligns with your mission of your organization's mission. So
yeah, like with
kinda,
challenge policies being like, this is to save the time of the staff because we can't have one person, even if this hasn't happened to you yet, you can point to real examples of one person putting in 1,000 challenges and say, okay, our challenge form needs to be difficult. It needs to be intentionally difficult because we don't want people spamming us because it's going to waste public money, right? Just put all these bullshit terms in there that don't matter and say, well, it is a good point, actually. I mean, you don't want to waste worker time doing this bullshit. But so you're not lying. You're just saying like, look, this is the way we should do this.
Make it so that you have to have a library card to actually put in challenges.
You have to have a library card in the area that you are placing the challenge. You have to have read the material in full before you can put in a challenge, that sort of thing. Try to make it, I feel like
must
so
live
much of
passages.
Yeah, like
if we say, sorry, we're not going to ban the book, you can't just challenge it again.
Yeah. You can't, there's a certain amount of time before you have to do it again. Yeah. Well, and I just feel like so much of what's going to happen is going to come down to very local politics. So that's really like what Justin's saying. What really we should be focusing on is figure out what is going on locally and harden it to that. And also, I know several libraries in Washington are having this push of the First Amendment audits, where somebody shows up with a camera and asks employees in public places lots of questions, trying to get them to trip up or tell them they need to leave or whatever. Which, like, yes, you should know what's legal where, but also harden your policies when it comes to public record requests, because there are a lot of these sorts of groups that are right wing that are using public records requests to try to trip up these institutions, causing lots and lots of tied up staff time if you don't already have a decent process for this. So that's another avenue that might start ramping up if it hasn't already in your area. So that's what I meant by hardening your policies.
Yeah, especially with like a bunch of records requests, a lot of the laws have like openings for saying like this is an undue burden on staff time, sort of stuff like that. So you could definitely have a policy that says like if the same person is requesting the same information again and again, because like records requests are good. Like this is all like FOIA stuff is good. But like there is a certain point where I remember there was someone, like one person specifically was harassing this library through FOIA requests and just kept putting more and more and more in. And I feel like at a certain point, you just have to have a policy that says like, they're not asking for new information. They're asking for the same stuff again and again. Make them get a lawyer, like make them get a FOIA lawyer and get them to come and tell you why you have to give this information over. Because if it's like a clear, like bad faith attempt, you don't have to feel bad about denying it.
Yeah.
If they're not like an investigative reporter, like why does someone who's not even writing anything up need all this information for? I know that's not how the law works, but you can say like, this is a clear like waste of our resources because no one's even using this information.
Yeah. And well, like, I don't know if it's possible, but being like, we have this many requests from this person, we're going to prioritize requests by like
you can only do so many requests per month, like a purchase
or just
request.
being like, you've put in 30 requests this month. These other 3 people have put in 2 requests this month. We're going to do 6 requests for you and then focus on these other 6 requests before we come back to your torrential downpour of requests or whatever. So like,
You're deprioritized and stuff, you know.
yeah,
And all that stuff exists within the law. So again, over complying
yes.
with laws, especially when they're being abused. Yeah, it reminds me. There's this thing going around on Blue Sky. Someone said like all these terms have been searched in like UT Austin's website, and because of SB 17, which I've been railing about because that's the one that says like you can't have any kind of gay or trans or affinity group, ethnic group, racialized group stuff. And this is like the anti-DEI bill. And they were saying like, oh, they were searching this on their websites to remove it. And the thing is, there wasn't quite enough context. And I imagine what that list was someone in the IT department was asked to look for these terms. And then they were passing that along to say, make sure that if you have any leftover stuff on your website that is not in compliance with SB 17, that you go and check these things. Wasn't saying like ban these terms. It was saying go look at them and make sure they're still in compliance, which again is still repressive, but it's not the same as like these terms are banned from the website. Although at my work, we had a collection called like DEI posters. And then one of our liberal, like someone I know is a liberal, said, why do we have DEI? We got to change the name of it. And I'm like, one, it's a research collection. The law says research collections are not covered. And I don't know what she was worried about. Like, you're not going to lose your job, dude. Like, one, I maintain, like, I'm ultimately responsible for that collection. It was directly, you could, like, the buck stopped with me. So I was like, this isn't your problem. But it was like, just leave it. And like, why are you freaking out? And then we also had the whole thing with the Pride display. We weren't allowed to do a Pride display this year. Again, because of SB 17, I said, no one's compelled to go to the Pride display. So it's not a DEI training. So it's not forced. There is no force. So SB 17 is not covered. That didn't work on the dean. And the third incident was we got rid of our DEI budget allocation for purchasing. DEIA. So we also can't collect for accessibility. So I said, hey, accessibility is legally protected still. Can we at least get the funding back for that? And then I got an email back that said, actually, we're just going to go back to area studies instead of DEI. So we're still going to collect all that stuff, but we're going to do it under area studies. It's like, okay, fine. Whatever. So yeah, like I'm glad that one, like I had, an ally in the building, but it was very much like, when you see your own supervisor like rolling over and not going to do a Pride display, it's like, what happens when the real shit happens? Like, what, like, are you going to stand up for me? No, you're not.
Do not comply in advance.
Yeah. And also reminded me, so because you were also of a public library at least, but I guess you could do this at an academic institution too. If you are a patron of the library that you also work at, you're allowed to do purchase suggestions, right? So even if you aren't in control of collection development or if you're not a selector or anything, like you can still do purchase suggestions. And like, I know the public library I work at, those are almost always approved. I mean, granted, my library has money. Not every public library has money, but like patron suggestions are like weighted so heavily because that shows that there is direct interest in something. And so like I literally went to like I am on like the inventory working group at the Lucy Parsons Center, and I was like, hey, what if all of us with library cards, we get 20 purchase suggestions every fucking month, each of us. All of the shit that we buy for the Lucy Parsons Center, why don't we also do purchase suggestions of those things at the BPL and the CPL, and then just start seeding the libraries with also the shit that we're selling here so that there's more copies of it, and it's also changing the collection.
Yep.
So, like, that's just like a thing that you could do, by the way. It's just like, hey, why don't you buy all this new shit that AK Press put out? It's so super cool. I'll read it. Me. I will.
Well, and like, let them turn you down. Or, if they go, we can't get this, we have to ILL it, you can go, oh, no, never mind. Like, you don't have to, you're not strictly committed. So, yeah, use that privilege.
Well, ILL stats are also used for future purchases because they demonstrate interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing that I added in here is try your best to weaponize your patrons against bullshit. And what I mean by this isn't necessarily like being like, yeah, radicalized or whatever. just if you have a pride display and somebody mentions how nice it was to see it, go, hey, can you put that in writing? Here's our comment form.
Yes.
Like, oh, hey,
Save nice emails.
Yeah. Would you mind sending that as an email to our director or to whoever? Like, when you get the things that make the library a good place, when you see those things happening, I know nobody likes to be bugged with a million links for feedback forms and shit, but when they come up, please just, hey, can you put in a comment about that? Hey, can you email that to me? Hey, if you don't want to put in a comment or email somebody, can I email about it and not mention you by name?
Mm-hmm.
Because that shows interest. So, you have people talking about DEI as bullshit when it comes up. Like, weaponize your patrons against the shit that's going to come down the pike against your library in particular. I know this episode is about what we can do outside of that, but you can also protect your own. So you can go, I had 3 patrons talk about how great it was to see the pride display this month, kind of thing. That's 3 more than you would have otherwise. So
this might dox my workplace a little bit, but whatever. Who fucking cares? They're not listening. So, like, every single week, the library where I work has a little, like, weekly bulletin it sends out to all the employees, right?
Mhm.
And in that
And
is
us too.
included, like, kudos and special thanks
Yep.
and everything from, like, patrons being like, this specific librarian with a name helped me, or etc. And one time was a picture, because one of the branch libraries had a Margaret Killjoy event. And that library, like an hour before that event was scheduled to go on, had an HVAC issue and so had to close. And one of the librarians working there, who was like, it's like a floater person, who wasn't even like scheduled to work at that event or anything, like helped move that entire event to a branch down the road in the same neighborhood. And the event like still went off without hitch. And in the library staff weekly that went out was a picture of Margaret Killjoy, famous anarchist author Margaret Killjoy, with some of my coworkers being and someone from the Lucy Parsons Center being like, thank you, librarian with a name. Who, it wasn't me, I promise. I was a person who attended this event because I was hype and I met Margaret Killjoy and it was very cool. But like, Margaret Killjoy was in my staff newsletter with a picture of one of my LPC comrades being like, thank you to this librarian who helped move this cool author talk that so many people attended that we had to keep getting more and more and more chairs for because like way too many people showed up to it. Like, that was in my staff weekly. Like, people pay attention to that shit. And then like cool shit, like cool anarchist authors show up in your staff email.
Yeah. So like, use that shit to the best of your ability. You don't have to be, pushing politics. You can do it nonpartisan, like just, don't do it about the person who asks why you don't have, Dr. Oz's latest whatever. You can still decide who you suggest to do what to. Just saying.
Cough.
Yeah, you can play favorites.
And remember, you're a patron at your library.
Yes.
Where you work, probably.
Yeah, I don't have any limits on how many books I can recommend, so I think anything I recommend gets purchased.
Yeah. The only time something I've recommended to get purchased was because it was a pre-order from like a weirdo. It was one of Elatron Frass's books that only like 150 are ever going to be printed ever, and it was still in pre-order, and the library was like, we can't get this.
I also wanted to talk about like digital privacy. You're probably, as the next administration comes in, going to hear a lot of people talking about different ways to stay safe. About 50 to 60% of it will be wrong information, I think, which is not a bad ratio, honestly. It's not all going to be bullshit, but people are going to tell you things to stay safe that like don't really matter. And so, listen to, I'm not going to say listen to true crime, but listen to like scam podcasts, listen to like Lie, Cheat, and Steal, listen to some podcasts about like what happened with Mayor Adams. Like, call people on the phone. If you don't put stuff in writing ever, don't write it down. Call people on the phone. Easiest way to get around most surveillance is just to call someone on the phone.
There's still metadata, so they can,
Don't use WhatsApp or FaceTime or any of that bullshit either. Use a fucking actual honest to God phone call, because if you're going through some sort of app, that might be subject to disclosure for somebody else too. So just stay aware.
I know on iPhone you can route your regular phone calls through Signal.
Mm-hmm. I think you could do that with Android too. You can change the default.
Yeah.
But doesn't Signal have a backdoor for intelligence agencies?
No.
No, I thought that they were like, "Fuck y'all, we're moving to Europe, and we will pull our app if that's something that's legally required of us." I don't know if they keep that later, but that was the last thing I heard.
And this is a rumor.
Was that WhatsApp?
It's what
it was probably WhatsApp.
Also Telegram. It was Telegram, is what it was.
Oh yeah, it was Telegram.
But this is also something that goes around about Signal all the time, and where they try to discourage people from using it because, like, well, the CIA got in that one time. It's like because they were able to break into the person's phone, and then they could get into, like, if people can get into your phone, then get into your Signal.
Yeah,
that's why you should also but like end-to-end encryption is end-to-end encryption, and no, there's not a backdoor. Signal is open source. You can see for yourself. It does not have a backdoor.
Okay, so there is an EFF site that came out called Digital Rights Bytes, and it's very like straightforward tech stuff. I think it feels like very entry level. So maybe that's a good place to start if you really don't know what's going on in the world. But again, when it comes to digital security,
surveillance self-defense that they put out.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff out there, and I'm sure in the future we might do more information on this kind of stuff. There's another episode kind of in planning about how to find information. I think we'll talk about privacy more then. But when it comes to like very, very basic privacy stuff, the kind of stuff that you can provide to your patrons, just make sure it's coming from organizations that really actually care about privacy. Try not to spread things you just hear on social media, because a lot of social media privacy advice is wrong. So just be careful with it. So I'll put the link to the Digital Rights Bytes, which might be something that would be useful to share with patrons, or hopefully they have like a printable version of it, which would be nice. If not, no, they did videos, but they got little graphics. So maybe you could probably turn this into a zine. Hopefully it's openly licensed and people can recreate this. Anyway, and then the last thing I was saying, has been saying all through this, is organize outside the library. You can bring outside groups into the library, make sure they know about the services that are available. But when it comes to, the limitations of being in the library can't necessarily become a solution for your community. It can't directly help people with their immigration problems. It can't shield people from the police. It can't shield people.
You are an agent of the state.
You
remember
work
that
for the state. Yes.
Yeah.
So you need to work outside the library. You need to get involved in your community. You need to find groups that, if nothing else, support them with your money. If you can't support them with your time, if you can't support them with either of those things, support them in some other way. Just find something you can do. Again, use your employer's resources. You've got rooms, you've got printers, you've got stuff. Steal pencils and give it to people. Like do whatever you can do. But ultimately, I think the organizing has to happen outside of the library. Organizing within the library and the library profession is just simply not going to rise to the task of what we need right now.
And for the love of God,
get into printmaking. I did. It's real fun. You can make propaganda real easy.
There you go. For the love of God, even if nothing else, get involved with your union if you're part of one. You do not believe how many people don't even think to show up to a single meeting or respond to a single email survey. So
remember, you are your union.
You are your union.
They are not a nebulous third party that is propaganda. You are your union.
And if you don't feel represented by your union, make a change.
Do a rank and file caucus.
Okay, so I just updated to the beta iOS, and it's now like goth mode. Kind of cool.
Nice.
Oh yeah, where it automatically changes all of the icons
to like dark mode.
Yeah,
it's sick. Yeah, so remember, update your phones to keep them harder to crack.
Update your phones to enter goth mode.
It's pretty sick. All right, Discord link is in the notes, so come hang out with us. I've been doing YouTube slot parties. They're very fun, but we need more people to show up because it's only fun in a group. So if you want to see rednecks doing tractor pulls or backyard wrestling between 12-year-olds or juggalos or I don't know what else I found.
Training videos.
Training videos, how not to get your wallet stolen in the 1950s, all kinds of good stuff. So chugging videos, gross stuff. The dude who smokes way too much weed at a time and starts melting. I love him. He's so dumb. Yeah, so come have fun with us. Good night.